still in 5-2. Now we're going to do some more of these. I'll just pick some different ones from our textbook to go through and factor. One thing we also need to remember is if it starts with a negative, you've got to factor out the negative. So let's look at question 31 on page 355. So we have a minus 6m squared minus 13m and a plus 15. Now the very first thing we have to do is we look and see if there's a number in common. 6, 13, and 15 have nothing in common, but if it begins with a negative, you have to factor out the negative. So if it begins with a negative, you factor out that negative. And what that does is that changes the signs. So then that makes that a positive 6m squared. That makes that a positive 13m. And that makes that then a negative 15. I think we did something very similar a few moments ago, earlier. Different, same type of numbers, but you'll get different answers than the one we did earlier. First times the last. The very first thing we do is we take our first number times our last number. And 6 times a negative 15, that makes that a negative 60. Now, what do we know? Well, we know that since this is negative, that tells us then that one number is positive, one number is negative. What's the sign in the middle? Positive. So we need a positive, and we need a negative.
Times negative 15, negative 90.
Oh, yeah, did I multiply wrong here? Sorry about that. Should be a negative 9. My mistake there. What I was thinking there. Sorry about that. Yep, so it'd be a negative 90. Okay, so now we need two numbers that are going to multiply together to give us negative 90. And so that means one number is positive, one number is negative. Now, what do we know about the numbers? We know the middle is positive, so the larger number is positive, smaller number is negative. How do we find the numbers? Well, where we begin is we look at the number inside the box. Okay, and we look at 90. Now, what do we know about 90? Move it so we can see a little bit better here. 90 ends in a 0. So that means 90 is going to be divisible by 5, 10, 15, and so on. So let's try a 5 first. If I try a 5, what does that give you? That gives you 5 and 18, right? And what is that 18 minus 5? 18 minus 5 is what? 13, and isn't that what we want? So if it ends in a 0 or a 5, if it ends in a 0, you're going to try multiples of 5 and 10. If it ends in a 5, you'll try multiples of 5. If it's an even number, you'll try other even numbers like 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. If it's an odd number, they're a little bit trickier. Odd numbers might have 3, 7, it might have 13, 11 in there, so they're a little bit different. They're a little bit more complicated. This ended in a 0, so we tried a 5, and that was 5 and 18. And that's going to work, right? Because 18 times a negative 5, well, that's a negative 90. And 18 minus 5 is what? 13. See how it matches with the middle. Has to match back with that middle. Now we can take that middle, that 13, and we can split it up. So we've got, and we don't need the negative there, sorry about that. Let me rewrite it so it's right here. We've got a 6m squared. We split the middle up into 18m minus 5m and a minus 15. So we took that middle and we split it up. Now what can we do? First two pieces, factor out. Can someone tell me what I can factor out of the first two pieces here? Yep, 6 and a m. So 6m is going to come out. That leaves you with an m plus 3. Any idea what we would factor out of the next two pieces? Negative 5. That switches your signs, and that leaves you with an m plus 3. Are my signs the same? Or groupings the same? Yes, they are. Groupings are the same. So m plus 3 comes out. What's left over? 6m minus 5. We're going to do a lot of these. Very, very important that you know how to factor these trinomials. The most important part of factoring is probably factoring trinomials. That was 31. Let's see if we can't work through 34. 34 is 8k squared plus 34k plus 35. This one's going to have a little bit larger numbers. We're going to approach it the same way. First off, can anything come out? No, because that 35 doesn't have anything in common with the 34 and the 8. No variables in common, so nothing can come out of there. Now, what do? We take the first number times the last number. And we put it in the box. So 8 times 35. We'll need a calculator here. 8 times 35 is a 280. Since this is positive, what do we know about the signs? Well, since it's positive, we know that they are either both positive or both negative. And we look at the sign in the middle. What's the sign in the middle? Positive. So we now know that they're both positive. Next, we look at our 280. And we need to figure out how we can break down this 280. So I'm going to try to put this on screen so that we can see it. Now, what's our goal? We want them to add together to give you 34, right? So 280 ends in a 0. So let's try a 5. We'll try that first. 5 and 56. Does that give you 34? Nope. Okay, let's try 10. 10 and 28. That's 38, so we're getting closer. 38, though, is too big. So we know we need a larger number. Let's try 15. Not 15. Nope. Yep, we need a 280, so 15 should be in there, I believe. Nope, 15 won't go in there. Let's try a 12. We'll just kind of go up till we find the numbers. 12 won't go in there. Let's see here. How about we use a 20? Okay, well, does 20 work? Yeah, and it's just guessing numbers until you find them. Now, I knew it ended in a 0, so that means 5s and 10s. 5 didn't work, 10 didn't work, 15 wouldn't even go into it, but 20 does work. Because 20 and 14 gives you what? 20 plus 14 gives you that 34 in the middle. So that's what we want. So we want a positive 20 and a positive 14. And we can check because 20 times 14 is 280. And 20 plus 14 is 34. And that 34 is right here in the middle. Now what do? Now we take that 34 and we split it up. So we've got 8k squared plus 20k plus 14k plus 35. Factor it by grouping. You should not have to rearrange the order on these. They should always factor the way that they are. So we've got an 8 and a 20. What number would come out? 4 will come out. And what else? 4 and a k, right? Because they have a k in common. Now we divide. 8 divided by 4 is 2. The k comes down, so that leaves you with a 2k. 20 divided by 4, well, 20 divided by 4 is 5. Next, what's going to come out of a 14 and a 35? What number do they have in common? Yep, someone said it, 7. So 7's going to come out. And what's left over? 2k plus 5. Are my groupings now the same? Yep, and they should be. If they are not, you made a mistake. So that's an easy way to know you made a mistake. If they don't match up, you made a mistake somewhere. So now that's going to come out as 2k plus 5. And a 4k minus 7. And that's your final answer on that. Question, how about 45? 45 is going to make us factor something out at the beginning. So question 45. (24x squared) plus 42x plus 15. This is the first one that we've had to factor a number out at the beginning. Because when we work these out, we have to make sure that if there's a number in common, we factor it out. So when we look at this one, we've got a 24, we've got a 42, and we've got a 15. There is a number that's in common with all of those. Does anyone know what that number might be? It's in common with the 24, 42, and 15. 3, right? Because 3 will go into 24, 3 will go into 42, and 3 will go into 15. If you don't take that number out, you'll have to at the end, and your numbers will be a lot larger and more difficult to work with. So if you see a number that's in common, you've got to take it out at the beginning. So we're going to take out a 3. So 24 divided by 3, that leaves you with an 8x squared. 42 divided by 3, that leaves you with a 14x. 15 divided by 3 is a 5. So the numbers are much, much easier to work with now. If we didn't do that, we would have to take 24 times 15. And that's going to give us a large number. But we don't, because now all we have to do, since we've reduced it down, is take 8 times 5, which is a 40. What do we know about the signs? Are they the same or are they different? Okay, both positive, right? Because it's positive 40, and the sign in the middle is a positive 14. What two numbers multiply together to give me 40, add together to give me 14? Can anyone come up with the two numbers? Add together to give you 14, multiply together to give you 40. Well, we needed 10 and a 4, right? Now, where did I know where to begin on this one? If you struggle with finding the numbers, what does it end in? 0. So that means you've got to have a 5 or a 10 in it, or a multiple thereof. So 5, 10, 15, 20, I would try things like that. Well, if you just start with a 10, that gives you a 10 and a what? 4, right? That gives you the 14. Because 10 times 4 is 40. And 10 plus 4 is that 14 in the middle. Now we can split it down into 8x squared plus 10x plus 4x plus 5. Factor by grouping. The first two pieces looks like they have a what in common? Got an 8 and a 10. What would you factor out? 8 and a 10 have what in common? They have a 2 in common, right? So 2 is going to come out. What else do these have in common? An x. So a 2 and an x comes out. What's left over? 8 divided by 2 is 4, so that's a 4x. 10 divided by 2 is a 5. Now look at the second piece. This one's a little bit different as well. With the second piece, 4 and a 5, they have nothing in common, right? So 4 and 5 have nothing in common. If nothing's in common, you can always factor out a 1. So if nothing's in common, you can factor out a 1. Now we can finish it, because these are the same. And that leaves you then with a 4x plus 5, gone, gone. 2x plus 1. And do not forget, what did we factor out? We factored out a 3. So there now is your fully factored, finished answer. We've got enough time to do a couple more of these. Let's look at question, let's do something that has different variables all mixed together. Let's look at, let me find one that's got several variables put together. How about we look at question, let's look at, well, we'll look at 52. So let's look at question 52. So question 52 is 6m cubed n squared minus 60 m squared n cubed plus 150 m n to the 4th power. And I picked this one because this one has multiple variables, and we can also factor something out at the very beginning. So we've got all these different variables, so we need to see what we can factor out. When I look at this, look at the numbers first. I've got a 6, a 60, and a 150. Now, if you struggle with where to begin, take your smallest number. What's my smallest number? 6. Does 6 go into all these others? Does 6 go into 60? Yes, 10 times. Does 6 go into 150? Yes, right? Because 150 divided by 6 is 25, right? So we know that we can factor out a 6. Then we look at our variables. These all have m's in common. And my smallest power of m is just an m. These also all have n's in common. And we want the smallest power of n. And we've got a 2, a 3, and a 4. So the smallest power would be an n squared. Is everybody all right with that so far? Now we can rewrite this. So we factored out a 6. 6 times divided by 6 is gone. That's a 1. M cubed. Take out 1. That leaves you with an m squared. So that's gone there. Negative 60 divided by 6. That leaves you with a negative 10. M squared. Take out an m. That leaves you with a single m. N cubed. Take out 2 of them. That leaves you with an n. 150 divided by 6. That's 25. The n comes out. N to the 4th, we've got 4. Take out 2 of them. That leaves you with an n squared. Now we can proceed to factor it. So let's go ahead and factor it. If there's no number, we'll put the 1 here. And I'm going to show you a shortcut that you can use on these now. So we'll probably try and do 2 or 3 more of these, hopefully. I'm going to show you a shortcut that you can use when it's a 1. This only works when it's a 1. If you have to add that 1 in, you can jump directly to your factors. A 1 times 25 is a 25. What 2 numbers multiply together to give me 25, add together to give you a negative 10? Well, first off, what do we know about the signs? That 25 is positive, right? So they have to either both be positive or both be negative. What's the sign in the middle? Negative. So we need a negative and a negative. What 2 numbers would work here? Multiply together to give you 25, add together to give you that negative 10. Well, what do we know about 25? It ends in a 5, so let's start with 5. If I use a 5, what do we have? 5 and 5, right? 5 times 5 is 25. 5 plus 5 is 10. So we're going to use a minus 5 and a minus 5. Now I'm going to show you the shortcut here. This only works when there's a 1. When you have to put this 1 in, you can jump to your answers. You can jump to the factors. You don't have to do grouping. If it's any other number, you're going to have to do grouping. But if there's a 1 in front, then you can just jump to your factors. And we'll do a couple of these where we jump to the factors. Now we look at our beginning variable. Our beginning variable is an m squared. So we split that up into m and m. Our ending variable is an n squared. So we'll split that up into n and n. What are our 2 numbers? Minus 5 and what? Minus 5. Now we can do one more step on this one, because what do you notice about these? These are the what now? These are the same. So they can go together as 6m n squared times m minus 5n quantity squared. So if they are the same, write them as a quantity squared. And that's just using the shortcut because of that 1. That's the only time you can use that shortcut. Otherwise, if it's any other number, if it's a 7, a 6, a 3, a 2, factor by grouping. But if you have to put that 1 in, you can jump directly to your factors. Let's do a couple of these where we jump to our factors now. Let's look at one of these where we can just jump straight to our factors. How about we look at question 28? We can jump to our factors on question 28. Why can we jump to our factors? Why can we avoid factor by grouping? Because there's no number in front. If there is no number in front, what do we add in? A 1. We know when there's a 1 added in front, we can save ourselves some steps here. 1 times 28 is a 28. 28 is a positive number. The sign in the middle is negative. 28's positive. They're either both positive or both negative. Sign in the middle is negative, so they're both going to be negative. Where do we begin? 28. Well, we can start with 2. That's not going to work for us, but 28 divided by 2 is 14. So we can see. I know it's hard to see sometimes on the screen here. 28 divided by 2, that's 14. 14 is not going to work. Let's try a 3. 3 doesn't go in there. What about a 4? Okay, 4 and 7. 4 plus 7 gives you what? 11, right? So I'm using 11. Or not 11, but that's what I want. I'm using a 4 and a 7. I always write the larger number first. We know they're both negative because we want a negative 11 here. Now we can jump to our factors. So we can avoid factor by grouping because of that 1. If there's any other number, you can't avoid it. You've got to do grouping. If there's a 1, though, you can jump to your factors. Okay, so what variable do we begin with? K. So we split that up into K and K. What variable's on the end? H. So that's H and H. What are my numbers? Minus 7 and a what? Minus 4. I think we've got enough time to do one more, and then I've got graded homework to pass back as well. Before you leave, I've got all your homework graded and recorded. Let's work out one more here. Let's do a fairly easy one. Just to make sure we know how these work, we just did 28. Let's look at, how about 27? So this will be our last one. We'll go back and look at 27. And we've got a squared minus 9ab plus 18b squared. We're in luck because we've got to add that 1 in. When we add that 1 in front, that means we can jump to our factors. So we can now avoid grouping. If there is a 3, a 7, a 4, 9, any other number in front, you're going to have to do grouping. But if there's just that 1 in front, and we had to add it in, you can bypass grouping and jump to your factors. 1 times 18 is an 18. What about the signs? Well, Sign in the middle is negative, so they're both negative. Can anyone come up with the numbers that are going to work here? Multiply together to give you 18. Add together now to give you 9. You should be able to hopefully look at these and see the numbers here. So what two numbers will work? Multiply together to give you 18. Add together to give you 9. Anyone got any ideas? Oh, well, yeah, what we want to look at is we want 9, right? So how about 6 and 3? 6 and 3 will work, won't it? Right? Because 6 plus 3 is what? 9. And 6 times 3 is 18. So the numbers that we're going to be using here are 6 and 3. Because 6 and 3 gives you 9 when you add them together. 6 times 3 is 18. We can bypass grouping. You can do grouping if you want. But if you can avoid it, avoid it. What's my beginning variable? A. So we split it up into A and A. What's my ending variable? B. What are my two numbers? Minus 6 and minus what? 3. All right, so that should now finish up all of 5-2 except for question 10. So your homework now is 5-1. You should be able to do them all. 5-2, you should be able to do them all but question 10. So you should be able to do all of them but question 10. And we'll look at question 10 next time. And before